I've been to church when I was about 20, twice a week, and became a youth leader and
Wow. Okay.
read the Bible back to front. The deeper I would dig, I guess a lot of the really hard questions just ended up being you've got to just have faith. Whether I'm the creator of the meaning or is there an inherent meaning. They were wanting to isolate me within this bubble
Right.
and only to create an echo chamber. I would think that the only thing that I struggled with when I was really in the church was this inherent feeling of guilt all the time. To have a purpose that is greater than oneself, I think that is the biggest thing. And that might not be God in a Christian sense for me, but like that message itself is, I just think, the greatest. Yeah. To free myself up to be able to say what I thought was good or not. I wanted to lose labels. I guess interchangeably what I would do and the way I speak to people is use the word life instead of God. I don't wonder so much about the creator because I think I've resigned to the point that I don't know that I would ever know that question. But in religion you can put that enhancing your life to it's because of God, whereas I see it's because of the messages that have been written in the Bible. But the excellent life comes from the belief in the faith. And I feel like you could do that, but I always was just in the back of my mind of you could do that to anything. It's incredible to have faith. I see the most relaxed people walking around because there's all this trust and there's not so much to carry on someone's shoulders.
Yeah, I just spoke to a young man from Australia. Just came to UK about 2 months ago, but has a bit of a story. Has been a Christian, been part of a Christian church in Australia, even a youth leader, but then came out of all that involvement, and now is probably not Christian, not calling himself Christian, although not quite rejecting Christianity outright or arguing against it. Just seems to have a set of questions, a set of concerns, specifically related to the need for faith, the need for more faith in a Christian understanding, where if we want to be in a better relationship with God, we need to have more faith, and that to him it's not palatable, something that he feels can be found elsewhere through other means. The meaning to life can be found outside of the need for more faith, he claims. So had a good discussion with him. I ultimately tried to present the case that more faith is not a bad thing. More faith equals more trust, and a trust in a relationship is the key thing. Who wouldn't want to have a trusting relationship? And if that relationship can be built with a creator, then that is the ultimate sign of health, sign of a healthy relationship, a restored relationship. So I appreciate he didn't see that the same way. We had a bit of a back and forth, and ultimately ended in a very amicable way. But yeah, I pray for him that he would not steer too far from his creator. That thing that he knew that perhaps was corrupted or presented incorrectly in his church, that he would not outright abandon. So that's my prayer for him. Anyway, have a look, have a think about what this conversation meant. What topics you would like to sort of reflect on. Let me know what your thought in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless. Do you have any faith, any religion, philosophy?
I don't have, I have faith,
Okay.
but not in the, I guess, traditional religious sense. Yeah, I've been to church when I was about 20,
Okay.
spent a year, and just decided it wasn't something for me.
So you spent a year being member of that community?
Yeah, right into
Okay,
it.
Like you'd be serving there,
Yep,
you'd be
yep.
attending regularly.
Twice a week, and became a youth leader and
Wow, okay.
read the Bible back to front.
Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and then you said you decided at some point that it wasn't for you.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
mind sharing a little bit kind of how that decision came about?
I think, I was asking a lot of questions, and for the most part of it, everything was good. But the kind of the deeper I would dig, I guess a lot of the really hard questions just ended up being you've got to just have faith, um, and I guess it just wasn't satisfying enough for me just to be answered with, well, you just have to believe. Yeah.
And the kind of questions, I guess you can share as much as you feel sort of comfortable with, but are the kind of questions, would you describe them as the questions of, I think usually people have like it is questions of like good and evil and the suffering, or it would be maybe questions of how do I reconcile, the science and what I know to be true from that perspective with the sort of the things that I'm reading in the Bible. Any of those things, or was it something completely different?
Definitely, probably not so much about science.
Yeah.
I think it was more probably in a philosophical sense, more about
Okay.
meaning, getting my meaning
I see.
from God, and having some opposing kind of thoughts about whether I'm the creator of the meaning or is there an inherent meaning.
That's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And how would you like today, if you're sort of thinking about it, obviously being outside of that community and outside of that church, how do you find that answer to that question, right? If not within the Christian worldview,
Yeah.
Christian kind of framework, is there a better framework that you think those answers could be found?
It's through just exploring lots of different worldviews. I think for me, it's reading books, and not taking anything as absolute truth, but just kind of bringing it into my own lens, and seeing what feels the most aligned with how I feel.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
never really saying is it completely true or not, but I think the books like I'm not sure if you read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's just ways in which we could create our meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, if I may take that maybe further a little bit, right? So, sounds like you're saying our search for meaning. Does that exclude the possibility of there being an external reality, like a God that would sort of disclose or reveal meaning to us? Or yeah.
I definitely don't think it excludes
Right,
the meaning in any way, and I definitely do believe in something higher, whether or not that is a god or something else's, to say whether or not they would give down meaning or there is purpose and meaning to our existence. I'm not excluding it, but I'm also thinking that I don't think I'm going to be told that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe going a little bit deeper then. So what is the message of the Christian worldview that you would say, look, that did not satisfy me? Like, how would you describe that message that when, kind of ultimately coming face to face to it is that, look, that doesn't answer it? Like, how would you kind of put that in a nutshell? Yeah. The Christian meaning, so to speak.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
the Christian meaning, and I'm just trying to understand what was it that led me to explore more.
Yeah.
I think I felt like they were wanting to isolate me within this bubble,
Right.
and only to create an echo chamber,
Okay.
and that didn't resonate with me. They very much encouraged, to stay within, not to seek advice from outside because it's not going to be the truth.
I see.
And I think the Bible is one of the best books I've ever read, and incredible meanings, and I still read it to this day because the things in there are just amazing and the meaning is amazing. It's just not so much that I'm reading it and translating it to the God, to say the Christian God.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Okay, now it's getting clearer to me. Thank you for kind of explaining, but it sounds like to me, just in my own words, it's not so much that you're outright sort of rejecting what the message of the Bible is, or even in a broader kind of sense, the Christian message. You just want to open yourself up and not be closed in within any specific, I guess at a very smallest sense, like that church's view of that or
Yeah.
interpretation of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then is there like a competing, like you said, you're on a search, you're kind of in that sort of journey. Are there like competing, maybe, you said Bible is great, that's
Yeah.
one of the greatest books, like you read Viktor Frankl and other things, like how would you describe other contenders, right, for kind of meaning? Is there like something?
Well, I mean, I see a lot of continuity in a lot of different religions, and I find messages that are the same but just worded differently. Um, I would think that the only thing that I struggled with when I was really in the church was this inherent feeling of guilt all the time,
Right.
especially when I was doing things that were, not so aligned with what was going on, and feeling like, I was to feel guilty about that, and I really struggled, and I really questioned whether I should be putting this guilt on myself, or if this is just something that I've made in my own head because I've been told it's wrong. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that like the idea of sin and
Yeah.
and being kind of reckoned or judged by God for the things that we do that would be sort of considered sinful?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, something as simple as having thoughts that were not aligned with it. Say, staring at a woman and thinking things that are, considered along the Bible
Right.
to be
Right.
things that I shouldn't be thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess, like you said, the Bible has a lot of things to say that are pretty. I would describe it as wise, right?
Definitely.
From my own sort of readings of it, right?
Yeah.
And to me, things like that, using that example, right? I found that I have the same thoughts, by the way. I'm not any different, but thinking about things and allowing myself to kind of run away with those thoughts, right, usually tends to lead to escalation and acts that are further down the road of that nature. So I found that wisdom to actually be very true, in the sense that the guardrails that the Bible sort of says, look, don't do this, even though it doesn't necessarily spell out all the possible sort of consequences of that, but generally tend to be for the benefit of human beings, right? So
Yeah.
even though it's not necessarily obvious how that sort of works itself out, but
Yeah.
you could go examples from you said lusting, but also things like even thinking murderous thoughts about someone, allowing the anger to consume you, and other things like that, right? Do you think there is something in that, right? Do you think that we are, as human beings, made where we thrive when we are given guardrails, and a certain sense of guilt is positive in that sense? It's almost like teaching us that there is a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah.
How do you see that, though?
Yeah, I think there definitely is great guidelines, and it's for the benefit of humans. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that, and I think I would say I actually have a bias in my time, because I'd started a relationship,
Yeah.
and I was new in this relationship, and being 21 in a new relationship and going to church was very tricky for me to balance.
Yeah.
So the bias of the guilt that I was feeling would have been a lot easier if I had not just gotten into a relationship.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, that would be my disclosure in some of my opinions. But for the most part, the messages and the guidelines, and saying, don't do this because you're going to benefit from it, I definitely agree with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to be too greedy towards things, and to have a purpose that is greater than oneself. I think that is the biggest thing. And that might not be God in a Christian sense for me, but like that message itself is, I just think, the greatest. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. But isn't it also the case that apart from the sin and the guilt and the ways that we should live, which I agree with you, it's something that a lot of the religions kind of have a lot to say about, kind of moral
Yeah.
what is good, right? So there's even the things like the golden rule, do unto others as you would wish them to do unto you. And you turn to Islam, you turn to Hinduism, you turn to Buddhism, Judaism. They all say about kind of love and being respectful and loving your neighbor. But something Christianity, right, I would say
does that as well, but then goes and does something quite unique, right? The word gospel, right? So you were a youth leader, right? So have you been in a situation where you've tried to sort of explain maybe to the youth groups or even to someone else, like the uniqueness, like is there something that sets Christianity apart, like that gospel kind of message, the message of that forgiveness and grace and mercy? How do you, just curious.
I mean, and I'm not sure if it sets Christianity apart, but I was a part of a Christian denomination.
Yeah.
For me, it was the relaxing into the idea that God's got you. That I wouldn't have to constantly worry about the direction in which I'm going. That if as long as I'm heading in the right direction, or say praying to God and following His word, that everything was going to work out. And there was a real ease to that, and I could see why a lot of people, it was really working for them. And that relaxing into, you follow God or this church and everything's going to be there for you. Community, they're going to look after you. If you're struggling, that community is so tightly knit, and as human beings we need community. And I think that's what the church, and that's not just Christianity, but I guess a lot of churches provide for the community. And I also, and this is not really what you just asked me, but it's just on my mind now, just while I was thinking about it. The reason why I like to not identify myself with a religion is just because if I do so, and I notice this within the church, if they had become a Christian through and through, that they had formed such an identity around that they would lose the ability to challenge or question anything, because to do so would be to challenge their existence. So I felt like you could lose a bit of haziness if the leader of the church had a perspective on something that might not be entirely true, because of course it's their perspective. But if you were to challenge him, you might be challenging your whole life. And how could one possibly do so? So I think to free myself up to be able to say what I thought was good or not, I wanted to lose labels.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think there's a sense of, it's a healthy, I think, attitude, right? Because you're not saying that you don't see value in the message. I'm going back to something you said previously, but the label is almost like becoming a hindrance.
Definitely.
To not allow you to get to the end game, to the end goal, the truth, whatever it may be.
Because there's too much at risk.
Right.
If you challenge that, or you have an opposing opinion, or maybe if you just want to question it and it's not something that you should be questioning, you might subconsciously not even bring that up, because you would be too worried at the consequences of an identity crisis.
Got it. I would say that makes a lot of sense to me. Would there be a risk of erring on the other side of the kind of almost like knee-jerk reaction, right? So just to present it to you, like from what you're saying, so going outside of a kind of a rigid-minded, maybe very specific, directed environment, such as maybe that church, to kind of freeing yourself up from that and saying, well, I'll go out on an open-minded sort of search there. I guess the danger of that other approach would be a little bit of too much freedom, as in, what is the criteria by which you would know that you have arrived, right? And is it just ourselves, right? Is it when we feel like this feels right, this feels true, this is for me? Is that sufficient? Because couldn't we be deceiving ourselves then at some point, right? Without too much guidance, without too much sort of other people telling us, we're telling things to ourselves.
Yeah.
And then how do we know that what we're telling ourselves is right or wrong, or could we just be deceiving ourselves? Like, how do you approach the, that search? That how do you put controls and guidelines that you're not deceiving yourself?
Yeah. I guess that comes down to emotions like guilt,
right,
or a general feeling of well-being, of if I've done something wrong, I'll sit and I'll stop and I'll really think about it, and I'll introspect and go through it and just be as truthful to myself as I can be. When you say I have arrived, what do you mean by that?
Oh, maybe I sort of have presumed something like, is there a place of arrival, right? Do you think there is a truth, like an actual truth? Like, so for example, the reason I use that word is that I have this sense that we're in the life is a journey, that we need to kind of get certain things right in our minds, like what is the purpose of life? What is my purpose? What am I here to do? What is my identity in the relationship with the world, in relationship to God, if there is one? That to me is arrival, as in you got answers to those questions because they are the most fundamental questions, and then you build on that worldview, on that framework, other things where you can decide, okay, where am I going to go in the world? What kind of a job am I going to get? Even what kind of relationships that I'll build? What am I going to say yes to? What am I going to say no to? I mean, those things are built on a set of kind of moral frameworks, but then that moral framework has to exist. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to kind of be consistent with yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So if you know you're on your right path, basically, you're in alignment.
If you're kind of very certain that right path is the right path. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I know ways that don't work. And I know that the things not to distract myself consistently by doing things, by just being very still and listening as to which way I feel like life's taking me.
Right.
I guess interchangeably what I would do and the way I speak to people is use the word life instead of God.
Okay.
You know, which way is life taking me? Where am I feeling called to? You know, I was back home in Australia 2 months ago and everything was right, yet when I would sit down in silence, it would feel like this isn't right and that I'm feeling stuck. Why am I feeling stuck? And then I would just write it out and then figure out where what feels exciting to me. I guess you could say that could be skewed, and you could trick yourself into doing bad things. I guess it's just a real trust in my own actions and what I believe is good and not, and also a great community of people in which I can be like, what do you think about this? And get their feedback on. Yeah. As opposed to having the rules set out for me in a religion, which doesn't feel as tailored and personal if I was to think that everyone's on a different course. And I felt like the big message in the Christian group that I was a part of was the main purpose was to bring people into the church.
Right.
Was to spread the word, was to get more people believing in God.
Right.
Yeah. And using my skills, or I was a musician, the first thing they did was shape me in a way of how can I best bring people in.
Right.
I want you to be a part of the music group.
Yeah.
I want you to do this. I want you to be up front. And in that way I felt a bit used.
Yeah.
And it just didn't feel like it aligned with what, I wanted to do.
Understood. Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that
No, it does. It does.
sense,
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit more maybe context and background where I'm coming from. So I'm a Christian. I became a Christian like in my adult years.
Mm-hmm.
In my maybe like 14, 15 years ago, let's say, here in the UK.
Yeah.
Being born in a Roman Catholic sort of, but being much more of a, being Croatia being Roman Catholic country, right? Everyone's a Roman Catholic, sort of like a nominal kind of church going on Sunday, but not really knowing what I'm doing. Just kind of, that's part of the culture. That's what you do.
Yes. Yep.
But then as an adult, having come to UK and just sort of maybe through a set of maybe circumstances, my wife helped a lot there, but just kind of like, okay, let's go to some churches. Not a lot of Catholic churches. So I ended up being to like an Anglican evangelical church. And then, but what really kind of then changed my course of my life is that I heard the Bible spoken like it was meaningful and it was truthful and it actually mattered. It wasn't just a bunch of stories for children, but actually there was great truths there, great wisdoms, and and actually a life-changing truth, the gospel, right? The fact that we are sinners, but God loves us so much that He gave His Son for us, right? I thought that ate at me. That sort of ate me all up inside, and to the extent that like I researched and I studied. I'm more of a kind of a science, to the earlier question. I wanted to know, is it true? Because if it's true, it has to, either I'm going to be following it or I'm not.
Yeah.
But I need to know whether it's true, and I did all kinds of research. I was like, this is sufficiently compelling, and there's sufficient evidence here. I have to now make a decision. Am I going to follow it? Am I not? And I made a decision to follow it. So I became a Christian. But then what happened was, like, I became a Christian, maybe like you, in that church, in that environment. And then what I started to realize that, yes, there was a lot of other things that were happening within the church that were for the purposes of the church, not necessarily for the purposes of furthering the faith or furthering the community or furthering the well-being of people, or even things like making the message known. If it was making the message known, as you say, it was making the message known in their own way, in their own building or in their own environment. So over time, those things became more apparent to me, and maybe for slightly different reasons than you, but like I myself started to sort of not so much align myself with the church itself, because I felt like that label, whether denominational or even being a member of that big church community, I found it to be more of a hindrance than helpful. But what I didn't want to do is that I didn't feel like they owned the truth necessarily, right? And so I stayed very much engaged with my own personal relationship with God, in the sense that loving the Bible, reading it daily, studying it. I felt like that truth didn't change. They didn't own that truth. That truth was out there. They were just participating. They were part of delivering it to me, and in whatever way they could. But now I sort of don't have to necessarily stay within that community to grow in that relationship, right? Even though I found that there is a sense in which a community is key for any personal walk in any sort of spiritual sense, because you do fall and you need help and you need encouragement and you need assistance and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's other ways that you can build that within a community of people, through friends and brothers and sisters. It doesn't have to be that church, right? So, but to me, that was maybe the difference, is that I found that the essence of my belief wasn't because of that church owned it. It was, they just packaged it and delivered it to me and allowed me to see it, to hear it. But it was true regardless. It was true because it was true. It was true because there's no way that we could be here on a number of different levels that if it wasn't true, right? And so it was a freeing thing for me, in the sense that that was a freeing knowledge that I didn't have to be just member of that church to continue to grow, but I could pursue it, that I studied then other denominations, other ways to follow and practice greater richness, greater even study of like the history, the church history. How did we get to here? How do we have all these institutions? What other institutions are there? How do people practice differently? What do other religions do? How do they say? Things like, all of that was very helpful to me, but it still confirmed to me that the truth is the truth. That's unchanged, right? I mean, no one has yet come to me and proven or argued very strongly for a different way, a different belief, right? So, but to me, that was the kind of the anchor, right? That was the anchor that, or is the baby in the bathwater, right? Just throw the bathwater out if it's incorrect. Do that. That's the right thing to do. But for me, the baby, the truth, was still there. It was still very much present. And I guess that's why I was asking you those questions, just to see if you think still that there is that external truth. Is it worth pursuing? Is it worth finding it? Or are you saying even that is potentially kind of on the shelf among other contenders where there could be an answer?
Yeah. I don't know if I would go looking for truth within religion, and I wonder what I go looking for in terms of truth. I think Yeah, I'm not sure. I definitely search for meaning and purpose, but not so much. I don't wonder so much about the creator, because I think I've resigned to the point that I don't know that I would ever know that question, and so I don't put my energy into that because I feel like it's exhausting for me.
Right.
So I put my energy in places elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, which is fair, right? I get that sense, but for me, it would be like, okay, unless you've kind of addressed that question, either positively or negatively, right? Either there is a creator, and if there is, a lot of things follow from that.
Yeah.
Or if there isn't, a lot of things, other things follow from that. But unless you kind of settle that in your mind fairly conclusively, I think there will be a sense in which all other questions will come back to that question.
Yeah. I definitely believe. I do believe in non-duality. So everything is one.
Okay.
I don't believe we're separate. I believe that when God, and we'll use just what the God created us and He created everything, we're all parts of Him, and that we, in a sense, are Him experiencing life in many different ways. It's Himself experiencing what He's created. I feel that everything is one. And that in a science fact, our egos are created to separate that. And when I've done my research about people having strokes and losing that side of their brain, them having that sense of non-duality, of that everything, this feeling of one comes to them. And I find myself falling more down that route, thinking that we are not separate, that everything is just completely one organism. Yeah.
And I guess that, okay, trying to understand sort of one, I'm not disagreeing with that at all, but in the sense that, okay, looking at that statement from a Christian perspective, right, it's not that everything proceeds from God, right? So you can say, yeah, from that perspective, everything is one, because everything that's created has somehow found its existence or its starting point within God. Even Satan did, right? Even he and the angels and everything came from God. So in that sense, they are proceeding from God, right? But where the lines start getting drawn is that we can make choices, and some angels did, and Satan did, right? And there is a spiritual world. I don't know if you believe in that or not, but where God's purposes are disagreed with, and so we find ourselves in opposition to the one that created us, right? So His will and His purposes are one thing, but we say no to that. We say, no, I think I can create my own path, my own purpose, and it might not be what God says. So we find ourselves part of His creation, and yet His opposite, His enemies, even in many cases, right? So do you think it's possible to have that oneness, right, and just still be an enemy of God, right? Because that's what kind of the Bible clearly says, right? Forgetting about sin and other things, but it's very clear about the fact that, we were, by our choice, choosing not to know Him, choosing to be separate from Him, right? And that is a story, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's the story of us making choices that don't align with His will.
Yeah. I definitely think there comes a time when everyone makes a choice. And I think, to me, it sometimes can be hard as to what has been programmed in someone's upbringing as a result of their actions, and how much choice do they have in their actions because they've been brought up a certain way. And I just wonder about that because I don't know, because I feel very lucky in how I've been brought up. But I can see when people do bad things and you look at their history and you can draw dots and see, I can completely understand, not excuse the behavior, but I just wonder, do these people even have the resources to be able to do so, to be able to make good decisions? It's not because they're opposing God, it's just they were abused as a child, they've had a really rough bringing up, and subconsciously they've acted out these patterns. In no way do I see them opposing God, it's just they've been dealt a rough card, and I wonder when is the point, and it's a bit later in life when they make that decision, and some people turn to God, and I see some people don't even get that option,
Yeah. No, you're right, and I think I kind of see that more from maybe two different perspectives. One is from what I know of God and the kind of, from what I understand his character to be, is that he certainly is gracious and knows when we are a product of our difficult situations, right? I mean, Bible is full of Jesus being very, very gracious and merciful to the outcasts of the society, like the prostitute who was steeped in sin, and yet he was gentle and kind with her, and even knowing that maybe she was a product of that society. Who knows? I don't know the situation. Obviously, he knew. But then him being very harsh with the people who should know better, right? With the Pharisees, right? And so from that perspective, I think there's a sense in which God is just and he is gracious. He knows the circumstance, right? So all of that is being taken into account. That circumstance of someone making bad decisions because of their upbringing situations are not going to be judged harshly as someone who is knowing and still does it, right? But then my other perspective is that even people, regardless whether it's people who find themselves in those circumstances or people who should know better, there are times where we just continuously are not pushed, right? We're not pushed, but we act on our own ego, right? Because we ultimately want to please ourselves or want to make decisions that ultimately benefit us, right? Because I think ultimately that's the sort of Adam and Eve situation, right? What did they lack? Like Adam and Eve, right? They had the garden, right? They had the fruits, they had life without end, they had the very presence of God in the garden. But yet the choice was presented to them by, whether you want to call it that this was a metaphor, whether it really happened, it's besides the point. But the choice was presented to them in a sense that they were told, okay, they were lacking something. There was something that God was withholding from them, that should they have it, they would be like God. They would know, they would know the truth, and they would know the right from wrong, and they would be like God. They would have that power, right? And that enticed them, right? So no one really, they would, if they just didn't do anything, they would continue to enjoy everything that God's creation had to offer, and yet they made that choice of eating from that tree of the knowledge of the good and evil because they felt like they wanted more. They wanted to be God rather than being in submission to God, right? And so to the other extent, right, even as much as God is gracious and merciful with all of our circumstances, I think so much more are we taking for granted and being presumptuous with his mercy, and then making choices where ultimately, if we're honest with ourselves, it is to please ourselves, to make our own benefit for that, right? I mean, that was something that I know in my own life that was true. Like if I died today and I was appearing in front of the judgment seat of God, or even worse, right? Let's say you could go into the movie theater, you could see, the story of my life, but including all my inmost thoughts and all the stuff, right? So like stuff that you mentioned before, right? I'll be pretty embarrassed about that. I know that I wouldn't stand very long before God, right? I know that for all the things that I would have an excuse of, there would be so many other things that I would have zero excuse for because it's purely up to me. I could not blame that on anyone else. That's my own baggage. That's my own debt that I carry with me, right? And to me, that goes back to God is just, and He is justice, and yeah, we can deal with that, or we can kind of pretend like that is not there. Is how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like to me most of the messages from the Bible and even, the story of Adam and Eve, God is protecting us from essentially our egos. And I find, and that's what I love so much about most of the messages of the Bible, is it takes a great level of self-awareness and pause to think about those things of what your ego is wanting and how it's so manipulative in a sense that you're trying to do things. And I guess that's what I've taken away from the Bible, as if I'm constantly thinking about those things and how my ego manipulates things and wants greed and wants more and it's never happy with things and it's not treating people right and putting people down to make me feel better. They're all things that, I could do, and I use the word ego, but not so much, and they enhance my life so much, but it's also without, faith towards God.
I see.
Yeah, so they're the messages that I got from it, and I saw those themes within every story. And I felt that they, to me, were the themes not only in Christianity, but all throughout religion, and how it can seem and feel that there is truth, because that is truth in enhancing a really good life. But in religion, you can put that enhancing your life to it's because of God, whereas I see it's because of the messages that have been written in the Bible.
Yeah.
And they're a great tool and a great way to have an excellent life. Not every single message, but I mean a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But to me, is there a more excellent life than a life with God, right? To go back to that story of Adam and Eve, right? Every single page, I think, of the Bible following the fall from Adam and Eve is a attempt by God to reconcile us to Himself, right? And what does Revelation ultimately reveal to us, right? It reveals to us that God comes back down on earth to be among us again, right? And that is His gift, right? His gift, or His desire, so much a great desire that even He gave His Son, right, was ultimately to give us the kind of excellent life that we want. But we don't realize that excellence is only found in His presence, right? What more excellence can we have than knowing that our Creator is there with us, He's for us, He is there to comfort us, to show us what actually is the benefit of us, right? So to me, I'm all for that statement, right? I'm all for us living an excellent life, but it goes back down to, isn't there a more excellent thing than, or is there a more excellent thing than being in His presence, right? That was His story, right? That's why He, the whole reconciliation of the entire world and humanity is the mission, His mission.
I think you're completely right that the idea of an excellent life with having someone backing you, that's for you, that's there for you, that's it's got your purpose, that's always going to be there for you, is an amazing feeling. And I definitely felt that and saw that. And if I said to you, you can have this excellent feeling, all you have to do is have faith and believe. And you get it, because you have faith and you believe. And you have this excellent life and God. But the excellent life comes from the belief and the faith. And I feel like you could do that, but I always was just in the back of my mind of you could do that to anything. You could have that belief and faith and have this excellent life of knowing someone's looking after you, knowing there's a greater thing than you. Say, for instance, I think that I asked this question when I was at church as well. I could use it all, but I could just say this tree. And I'll say this tree is going to look after you. And you'll feel all of these amazing things, that someone's going to look after you and feel for you and create purpose and always have your back. and all you have to do is have faith. And he said, I don't feel it. And I just said to you, you need to have more faith. You need to have more trust. And if you still don't feel it, the same thing. You need to have more faith and more trust until the point you do, and then you go, okay, I believe. And that's how I felt when I asked that question of the answer being always, you need to just have more faith, and then you will feel those benefits of all those great things you just said.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, and I can see how that can be, if presented in that way, that can be ultimately a very, I don't know, depressing or something, right? So, because you feel like you're always lacking, right? Maybe. Sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? But the way you described it to me, right, is like if someone, you have to have more faith. I guess in some ways I can see why someone would say that, but in another sense, it feels like it puts the it's some sort of the faith ends up being some sort of a work. It puts it like it's some sort of a deficiency, whereas I kind of more describe it as, you know, if you do think about it as a relationship, and if I kind of map my faith and my trust in God, let's say to my love and my trust to my wife, right? We are married, right? We are married, and it's not going to change the fact that we're married unless I decide, or we decide to divorce, right? So what do I therefore need to do? I need to love more, but that there's a sense, yeah, I can, what does that mean? Like I have to buy gifts or other stuff? Probably not, right? Because these could be kind of superficial things. But it does have a sense of kind of maybe, well, what, you know, going back to the beginning maybe, so what is it that got us together? We loved one another. We know certain things about another. What is her character? What does she love about me? What do I love about her? Meditating on that, and then trusting that is what binds us together. That is what we're here for. And then if I ever sort of start wandering away from that, that is what brings me back. That is the truth that kind of was there from the beginning. And that's what I was sort of saying. I mean, to me, I'm not by any means someone who's sort of not questioning things or but I go back to, okay, what does God want from me ultimately? If he really wants to restore me and to have a relationship with me, great. That's the right answer, right? It's not going to be going more to church, more prayers, more Bible studies, more reading, more anything. It's just going to be giving of me to him, so that he can have me. He can have all of me. I will try to remove almost myself, my ego, to your point, right? That's what I need to maybe remove. That is maybe the barrier, right? Maybe I need to be less of myself, not more of myself, so that relationship is set right. Because I think that's, if you think about it as a relationship rather than some sort of an employee or something like that type of, it's more of a human relationship rather than an employee relationship. That, to me, changes the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, just offering mine.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I just feel that it is, the gift in itself is the faith in itself.
Yeah, okay.
Like, that is where all that fruit is. It's that faith. And I guess my perspective was, you know, the Bible's there and the religion's so well brought up that it's so great to have this faith in God, but it's actually the faith and the trusting and believing in something greater than oneself that is what's so beautiful about it. And the Bible, which is a great book. Yeah. But I just lack that it believing and the faith in God. Yeah.
Which now that you said it, reminds me of that verse of that. I forgot who it was. Was it one of the people who were healed in the Bible, and or his son was healed or something like that, right? He didn't think that Jesus was going to be able to heal him, and it says, Jesus said, "Would you want me to heal him?" And see, the guy says, "Yeah, if you can." Say, if you can, all is possible for those who believe. And he said, "I believe, help my unbelief." Right? The guy said to Jesus, "I believe, but help my unbelief." It's almost like what you said reminds me of that, right? Just said, "I have faith, I think. Help me have more faith. Help me have more faith," which I think is a biblical thing in itself, right? So if I think as Christians we are to ask for more faith, and He is able to give us more faith, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, certainly.
Yeah, it's incredible to have faith. You know, I see the most relaxed people walking around because there's all this trust, and there's not so much to carry on someone's shoulders.
That's right. I mean, we speak of peace, supernatural peace, of hope, and you know, even people, you know, Christianity in the early church, right? They went to terrible situations singing, right, on the cross, and whatever, being torn apart by animals, and in sort of Roman amphitheaters, just because they knew where they were going was a better place, right? They knew they had that trust, they had that peace, they had that faith that sustained them through the harshest times. And I think that's the thing about, you know, I don't expect as a Christian that I'll have an easy life. That would be completely wrong. That'll be like the prosperity gospel, which I completely reject. It's not that Jesus promises an easy life. He promises a life of fulfillment, of peace, and that could be through the harshest sort of situations in life. Yeah. But anyway, I've taken up.
Yeah, that's all right. Enjoyed the chat. Anyway.
Huge amounts of your time, and I want to thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Your story.
Yeah.
And well, we wish you all the best here in the UK as on starting up. But also maybe I just hope and maybe pray that your journey's not maybe fully over. You know, I would pray that faith maybe that we all need more of, that maybe it'll come to you. Maybe it's worth even asking for it. And I believe that that's a gift, and it's a very nice gift to be in that relationship with our Creator. But appreciate where you are right now, and that needs to kind of work itself out in your life.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.